Let's let her rip.
All right, Deidre, let's start with the basics. Can you explain what the achievement gap is and why it's so important in Wisconsin?
The achievement gap, and yes, it is extremely important in Wisconsin. The achievement gap is any gap that we see in scores between the achievement of children, the achievement of students, between any particular targeted groups. There's actually three achievement gaps. There's a gender gap between men and women are outperforming men. Even more women going to college is one of the things that we might talk about. But then we're also talking about the socioeconomic gap and the racial achievement gap. And United Way is particularly concerned about the racial achievement gap because we don't want to see a gap between those students of color and our white students.
Perfect, thank you. Now, I'd like you to start in on Schools of Hope and why Schools of Hope was started in Dane County.
Mm-hmm. Schools of Hope was started from a civic journalism project that really began between the Wisconsin State Journal and WISC, our Channel 3 affiliate here in Madison. They started with a civic journalism project and they looked at various areas of the industry in Madison and Dane County to figure out what was going on, how things were changing dramatically in 1995. They got to the schools, they went to the school system, they started taking a look at the data and they thought, oh my word, there is a huge achievement gap here between children of color and white children. And they're extremely concerned about it. And the editor at the time was just devastated by it actually, and he called United Way and he said, I can write about this problem. He said, but I don't know what to do. Can you do something about this problem? And so United Way said, well, sure, we'll at least take a look at it. And of course we did the first thing that all United Ways do when faced with a problem. We formed a committee to take a look at what was going on in the school district, take a look at the data that they had found and determine that, wow, we do have a tremendous achievement gap. It exists at every level, it exists at every subject, and we were greatly concerned about it as well. As we started over a year-long study about what we might be able to do about the achievement gap, we came down to the understanding that it was really important that children learn to read by third grade. If they don't learn to read by third grade, then they're going to have a very, very difficult time reading and making that the learning opportunity that it is beyond third grade. And so it became important to us to make sure that children were reading in a proficient or an advanced manner by the end of third grade. We set a goal for ourselves back in 1996 or 7 at this point, and we set a goal for ourselves that we wanted to reduce the achievement gap in third grade reading. And at first the gap got worse, and then gradually the gap got smaller and smaller and smaller. And by 2000, we said, wow, this is terrific, we're making good progress on that. We set a goal for ourselves to eliminate the racial achievement gap by 2005. But in 2004, we had eliminated the racial achievement gap in third grade reading. And then Superintendent of Schools Art Rainwater then declared to our board, he said, you can no longer tell whether or not a child is going to be proficient in reading based on the color of his or her skin. And that was a moment in November of 2004 that I'll never forget, set shivers up and down my spine, because we had set our minds to doing something and we were able to reduce that achievement gap.
Right. Dane County's United Way is nationally renowned among United Way for having a wonderful tutoring program, Schools of Hope.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we just came out with the national report card on achievement gap in Wisconsin is the nation's worst. Why does that make Schools of Hope all the more important at this point in Wisconsin and in Dane County?
The achievement gap, as I mentioned earlier, has many different problems, and it's extremely complex. And we see that here in Wisconsin in particular, and it same holds true in Dane County, that we not only have a racial achievement gap, but we've got a low socioeconomic gap, and both are working in the same way because so many of our children of color come from low socioeconomic means. So we've got both things affecting those children. We do not have a strong middle class children of color here in Madison, and it appears to me to be the rest of Wisconsin as well. And so as a result of that, many of our students of color, like 80% of our students of color, are also on free and reduced lunch, indicating they come from low socioeconomic circumstances. Both those things are affecting them as they get ready for school. So it is both the way that we do our tutoring, and it is the number of children that have also grown that's been very important to this whole thing as well. So we're training tutors to work with the classroom teacher on the curriculum that the teacher is working on, and we're trying to recruit as many tutors as we can, because the model that has shown to be effective especially from this last evaluation in
Right.
which we just participated, that when a child is tutored one-on-one or one-on-two, and we have a dosing of over 8 sessions, it's extremely effective, and that child can grow in his performance on the scores of the tests that they're taking. So we know what to do, we know how to get it done, and we just need to have more tutors,
Right.
because the important thing here is we've had more children of color and more children of low socioeconomic circumstances now coming into the district. Those numbers are upwards of 56% low socioeconomic status, and just over 50% children who are children of color.
Right. So as you said before, the best way to tutor is to have one-on-one or one-on-two time with a tutor. That's because the tutor is able to form a relationship with that student and a relationship of trust. Do you have any memorable or inspiring stories of tutors and their students through Schools of Hope?
Oh gosh, there have been so many through the years. I'll give you a couple that were particularly memorable to me, and you'll edit it, right? This is not a Schools of Hope story so much it is a story about a child and his mother who were homeless. And like so many homeless families, when they become homeless, and this family became homeless because of socioeconomic circumstances, she lost her job. She and her son, who was about 6 years old, started couch surfing, where they go and stay at various homes as long as the person will let them stay,
Yeah.
Friends and relatives and such like that. And they were doing this couch surfing for a number of months as the family tried to get back on its feet. And through time, the little boy got more and more distance from his mother. He knew it wasn't right. We know there was food insecurity in the household. He wasn't eating on a regular basis. They didn't know where they were going to be sleeping sometimes from day to day. And the mother was very concerned about this because she thought she had a good relationship with him. They'd always been able to talk, and here he was just kind of shutting down day after day. So one day the little boy said to her before the school, and he said, "Mom, you're going to be around tonight?" She said, "Oh yeah." And he said, will you help me with my homework?" And she said, "Well, of course." And she was so pleased. He's finally asking for something. This is good. And so that night she picked him up at school, and they walked home. And she said, "You needed some help with your homework? Let's work on it." And he said, "Well, Mom, it is math." She said, "Well, I think, first grade math, I can do it. I can do it." And he said, "Well, Mom, it's really not so much about the math." He said, "But here's what the question is." He said, "I'm supposed to count the number of doors and windows in my house for math class." He said, "I just want to know, where are we sleeping tonight?" So that's a very, very sweet story about a family that we eventually helped, not through tutoring, but gives you an idea of the scope and the dimension of some of the children that we tutor through our Schools of Hope. And this is a family that we are also helping by getting them into housing first as well.
Right.
If it's appropriate, use it in the video. One of my favorite stories is one that has been repeated many times in different ways.
Gotta stop there, gotta switch back. Okay, second one, we're good.
Here's another story that just charms me, Mandy, and that is we had a young AmeriCorps member who was working with us as a brand new tutor and was placed in one of the elementary schools. And as we see in the elementary schools here in Madison, she ran into a problem in that she had a child that she was trying to coordinate tutor with who spoke Spanish, and so she didn't speak any Spanish. And she'd gone through the United Way training, and she'd learned that if she could ask for a volunteer. And so she thought she might be able to get a volunteer tutor to help her with this child. And so she went on to our volunteeryourtime.org, and she placed a posting that she needed to have some help with Spanish translation for a child in the elementary schools, and she just had just a few words to be translated. So she put that out there, and she was amazed. Within hours, she got a response on Volunteer Your Time. A woman responded. She said, I'm happy to do this. I'm completely bilingual. Send me what you need to have translated for this child." And so she was thrilled. She sent the material off, and it wasn't a lot. And the woman translated it and got it right back, and it worked out very well, whatever the situation was. Well, she had this woman's name now, and a couple of other times, this little child again still needed to have materials translated. And so again, a couple more times, she emailed this woman, and she said, "Would you help me again?" The woman said, "Sure, whatever you need." Well, a couple weeks went by, and she needed to have a little bit more translated. It was a little bit more complex and a little bit more difficult. She said, well, I'll contact this woman again and see whether or not she'll translate it. She's been so gracious. So she wrote an email to her and said that I've got something that's a little bit more complex, a little bit more difficult. I'd really like to actually not only share with you how your translation has fit into our project, but tell you a little bit more about what we're doing, and can I take you up for a cup of coffee? And the woman responded back pretty quickly, and she said, just send me what you need to have translated. Really, it's okay, she said. I'm happy to do it. She said, I'd really love to meet with you, but I can't. You see, I live in Argentina. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Doesn't that talk about the global ability of us to be able to use volunteers in a way that we don't necessarily think when we're trying to match up local volunteers here and there?
Gosh, that's
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah, it's very cool. So they formed a nice relationship over time. Through
Emailing
email.
back and forth, translate this. Now it all makes sense.
Story is very typical of many of the tutor stories that we have heard of, and this was in particular was again a little boy. I think he was in third grade, and he was a student that had behavioral problems as well as reading problems, and he was having difficulty in focus and concentration and what sometimes we call sustainability. He couldn't stay with the book for a long period of time, and the person that was his tutor was a retired farmer. And this retired farmer just showed up. He was very consistent and in this little boy's life, and made sure that he worked with him all the time, and in a way gave this little boy great permission to fail. The farmer was very kind and said, come on, you can do it. He was very encouraging at the same time. And for a period of time worked with the teacher to say, I think what he's doing here in the classroom is beyond his means. Can we just back up a little bit? Can we go back and see if we can just develop more reading? And so they worked on reading fluency and speed and not tried to do so much on vocabulary. And this little boy just blossomed underneath this farmer who came in the bib overalls and the plaid shirt and the red bandana hanging out of his pocket. And the two became very close friends. And the little boy was able to read proficiently by third grade, and the farmer had stayed with him for several years beyond that, because he wanted to make sure that little boy had what he needed.
Yeah.
I'll leave you with one last story. You get the Kleenex out. I forgot about this one. I'm sorry. I tried to put it out of my mind, I guess, but it is something else. We had a little girl in kindergarten whom the kindergarten teacher had identified as needing help from a tutor. They had identified that she was behind developmentally in kindergarten and had very small language abilities. And so the kindergarten teacher indeed lined her up with a tutor who came in once a week, as the model has us do, and work with this little girl for about 15 or 20 minutes once a week. And after the first time that the tutor showed up, a woman showed up to work with the little girl. Incidentally, the little girl's mother was in prison, and she was being raised by a male relative. And every day after the tutor first came, the little girl would go up to the kindergarten teacher and said, "Is today that day the lady is coming for me? Is today the day that lady is coming for me?" It was something like Thursdays. And indeed, the woman showed up on Thursday again. How needy that child was to have the attention of this wonderful woman who came in once a week to speak with her and to work with her and to read with her. And indeed, that little girl got way caught up. The kindergarten teacher shared this story last year because she was just amazed at what the additional time and attention that one tutor can create in a child's life.
Great.
Okay, I work for the state of Wisconsin, and I don't know if this is where you want to start, but when we moved out to the South Madison neighborhood, the secretary of the office that I work in really wanted to make an impact on the South Madison community and bring something positive to the neighborhood. So we did a couple of things, and one of them was working with Lincoln School. And we've been out there probably 15 years, so it's been a really neat experience. And what's been nice is the employer supports us. We do take personal time for this. We don't take paid time, because state employees, that would really cause some angst in the community, as you can imagine. But an hour makes a world of difference. So
Yeah, and I guess that's where I want to start.
Mhm.
I want to hear about your experience tutoring and the value that's brought in your life and the value that's brought in these students' lives as well.
Okay. It's cliche to say that it's such a rewarding experience for me, and I say it every year, especially when I get to May and the school year is over, and I've met with the student all year long, and I can't believe the year has gone so fast, and I feel so good about going there. It's just amazing. You know, the students, I'd like to say I have a Helen Keller story where someone just totally blossomed and learned all of these wonderful things. I don't have stories like that. My stories are more simple, but I think they make an impact on the student. So I went through some of the thank you letters that I've got
Oh my
from
gosh.
students over the years. And I've been doing this since 2005, so I'm on my 9th year. I'm working with my 9th student. I work with a single student for 1 year. And I pulled out this thank you letter, and she says, "Thank you for coming and reading with me. I had fun reading Harry Potter and working on ocean animals with you. You taught me how to stop at periods, read more clearly, and not to stop in a sentence. You helped me by putting a piece of paper under the sentence, and that way my eyes could follow along while I was reading." It's something that simple, but it's something that I was able to show her, and she picked it up. And that little thank you letter, I'm like, okay, I'm going back next year. I'll do this again. So those are the kinds of experiences. Another one that happened last year, there were 3 of us, and we were mentoring in one teacher's classroom, and our assignment that day was to work on spelling words. So we had the spelling list, we all had the same list, but we worked separately with our children. And the assignment was spell the word, find the definition, and then practice the word. The word was tablet. So we found it, and then we said, so what's a tablet? Every one of our 3 students said, it's an electronic device. And so it brings us back to, oh, no, actually it's not that, it's this. But we all went back saying we need to change our dictionaries now, so we learned so much from them. They're joyful to work with. I come from a very small town. The biggest difference in the town that I come from were Catholics and Lutherans. I didn't have a chance to work or grow up with kids of different cultures, different minorities. So working at Lincoln School is like going to a UN every week, and it's a great experience for me. One year, the student I had, they spoke Chinese in the home.
Okay.
So our goal was she was going to teach me Chinese. I now know hello and goodbye. So that's it, but I learned. So it's a good experience.
And do you feel like since your employer supports you in doing this tutoring, has that changed your work life at all?
Absolutely. I go on Mondays this year because that's what works best with the teacher. And some Mondays they'll be getting into work and it's so hectic and you just think, I can't leave here for an hour. I leave for an hour, I come back with a completely different attitude. It gets me away from my desk, it gives me a new perspective. And having employer support is huge. It is just absolutely huge. I don't think I would do this if I didn't have their support.
Right.
I don't see how it would be as rewarding as it is.
And do any of your other coworkers tutor as well?
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of the one who goes around going, you should really come to Lincoln. And that's how I got involved. A coworker said, we need an alternate today. Could you come with us? I've been going ever since.
And you got hooked.
Mm-hmm. So I do the same thing to people.
And it's something to talk about too with your coworkers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To get ideas on how to tutor and also to share your stories.
And also people need to know you don't need to be a teacher. You don't have to know all of the answers. Quite often we'll come across a word in a book that I know the word, but I don't necessarily know the definition. We'll go find a dictionary. We'll go look it up together. So we both learn. We don't do math, which is probably good for me. I'm not a really strong math person. But the reading and the encouragement, and especially with the students who have English as a second language,
Right.
It's really, really critical for them that they become comfortable, because if you can't read, you struggle with everything.
Right. Do we have any other questions? I can't remember. Are you through Schools of Hope, or did you do this through your employer and getting involved that way?
It's through my employer, but we do sign up through Schools of Hope.
Oh,
So we
okay.
do the background check, which is very simple. It's through the Madison School District.
Right.
And we do really want to protect the children. We don't want to put them in any position where they could be harmed
Right,
in any way.
exactly.
So, we're very aware of that, and there's really, the application process is a breeze.
It's really simple.
Yeah. In fact, this is the first year that I know it's online,
Yeah.
and that was extremely simple.
And do you reapply every year then?
What I do is, because we've worked with the same teacher for many years, I contact her, but I
Oh,
do
okay.
work with the Schools of Hope person because I know she tracks our hours, and that
Okay.
makes a difference as well.
Yeah.
Maybe another thing that I would just point out is I found a memo that I wrote just to my employer this past year about how this has benefited the children, and what I noted was that the Schools of Hope coordinator said that Lincoln School students showed significant improvement on standardized tests that are required under No Child Left Behind. And while Lincoln School was still labeled as a school in need of improvement, he felt that the tutors could increase their scores enough that they wouldn't risk losing funding. So what we do, one child at a time, is really, really making a
Right.
difference.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
My question and just focus on what you're talking about and use bits and pieces from that.
Okay.
And if you want to mess up or start over, it's totally fine because we're doing all the edits. So,
Oh, that's so nice.
so just so you know, if you're like, I don't know what track I'm going down, I need to restart, go for it because we can definitely edit it out.
Good, because yesterday I was talking to somebody and I couldn't get the words out, and she goes, "Okay, just start over." I'm like, "Oh my god."
All right, are we good, Jeff?
We're good.
Okay, so I want to first ask, how do you become a volunteer with Schools of Hope, and what is the commitment when you become a volunteer?
So the biggest thing is to be interested in helping kids succeed in school, and if that's of interest, then there are many options of different schools to get involved with. And I think for folks to look at a school in their neighborhood or close by where they work, whatever would
Right.
work best for them. And then it's expressing that interest to the coordinators of the program, filling out an application form, having a background check too, because we want to make sure that everything
Right.
is good to go. And then the commitment really is a weekly commitment with the child for at least a semester and hopefully for the whole school year. It's very important the kids have that consistency, continuity of the person being with them on an ongoing basis.
Right, and what's out of the workday, how long do you normally have tutors sit with these students?
Well, I would say the whole commitment is probably from start to finish maybe about an hour, hour and a half, but
Okay.
that whole time isn't with the students.
What's the time with the student?
Probably about a half an hour, 45 minutes
Okay.
is the amount of time you spend with the students.
Great. And then, how can businesses get involved with tutoring?
It's a great way for businesses, a great opportunity for businesses to get involved with. I think one thing for companies to look at is sort of the neighborhood of their company
Right.
and looking to be a good corporate citizen in that neighborhood.
Right.
So I think to look at a school that's nearby to partner with, and then through the Schools of Hope program to see how they could best engage their employees. I think for companies to allow some flexible time in an employee's schedule, so if it's that they can take an extended lunch hour or
Right.
take a period of time off and then adjust their schedule accordingly, because of course it's during the school day, which is when
Right.
most people are
Right.
working. So I think the biggest thing companies can do is to allow that flexibility in an employee's workday. And if they take this on as a partnership with a school, then it's fits in with their corporate values and it says this is what we're committed to helping kids succeed in school, and we're going to partner
Right.
with this particular education.
And what is the training like for becoming a tutor?
Well, there's a really good training about how to work with the kids, and again, it depends on what age that the tutor would be working with, but it's sort of the school culture. It's what to expect when you meet with a child. It's the boundaries, because there are certain things that tutors are supposed to be doing and certain things that they're not supposed to be doing, and I think it's important
Right.
for volunteers to understand what those boundaries are and what they do if a situation arises that they're not comfortable with or that they have a question
Right.
about. Who do they go to? So it's a lot of and then just sort of how to structure that time and make the best use of the time, how to help kids do well and questions to ask and how to do those prompts so that
Right.
it really is the child that's learning and you're not telling them or reading to them or doing the work for
Right.
them and kind of and how you best do that.
And it's the training with the tutoring that makes the tutoring so much more impactful because these tutors are trained in what they should be doing.
Mhm.
And so they're really using that, if it's only 30 minutes, they're using it wisely.
Exactly, and I think those questions about if something comes up and they're not quite sure what to do or how, if maybe the student hasn't done their homework and how do you approach
Yeah.
that? You know, you're not their parent, but you know, how do you let them know that we are here for a productive time
Right.
and to make the best use of this. Here's what you need to do, here's what I'm going to do, and
Right.
then kind of together we're a team in this, but we both have mutual responsibilities to make sure that this is successful. And a lot of that, of course, depends on the student doing their end of the deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's part of the training too, just how to do that appropriately.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we good?
How many, are you with United Way?
I am.
How long has it been going on? How many tutors have you had? Can you comment on how many businesses might be, just so we have
Yeah.
numbers to use?
You know, I am not the one, I don't know how many tutors have been, because I'm not the one directly involved with the program, so I'm sorry, that's,
Oh.
No,
I don't.
yeah.
Yeah.
For I think for our purposes, I asked you all the questions and you answered them wonderfully for.
Is there a website or a phone number? I mean, I don't know that it has to be in our video either. If we want to get those stats.
Jeff said we could put
Yeah,
it
we
in
can
a
add that.
Just
a
put it on the
screenshot.
screen.
Yeah,
There's
we'll
lots
put
of
it on the screen.
flexibility.
Yeah.
where you put it.
So the school, I think it's just
It's
schoolsofhope.org.
schoolsofhope.org.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so. and
Kathy, when you're out recruiting businesses, for example, for the Business Volunteer Network, what resonates most with them as far as getting them on board with, promoting volunteerism within their businesses?
For tutoring specifically or any kind of?
I kind of mean tutoring specifically, if you can comment to that, but
Yeah, I think for tutoring, looking at that, we need well-educated students to become our future workforce. And to really make that investment in kids is really important, and businesses care about having a good workforce that's going to be there in the next several years after these kids graduate and hopefully go on to college or secondary school. So I think that resonates really well, that we all have a responsibility and a desire to have well-educated kids. Otherwise, I think for companies in general to look at what their mission is all about, what their values are, might be a company that's really into, like the environment, and so they would want to do something more related to sustainability or environmental issues. So I think kind of whatever issues relate to what the work of the company is, then you can relate it back to your mission and your values, is another thing for companies to look at. A lot of companies look at what our agenda for change areas are and say, well, we know those are the most critical areas in the community, otherwise we wouldn't be working on those. And those are sort of their filter for the things that they get involved with, so they'll use those as criteria for their engagement as well. Yeah.
Do you find any small businesses, like 10 and under or 20 and under, that are coming in with volunteers, or is it mostly the big, huge corporate entities in that scenario?
No, it really can be any size, and I think it's kind of, and of course there's different maybe challenges in different size companies. If you've got a really small company, not that everybody's a lot of people sitting around to fill in for others, but if it's a smaller company, again, allowing that flexibility in the work
Right.
schedule is kind of the key, if people are able to do that. But you've got companies people are working different hours, and everybody works, 8 to 5. So if people are working evenings or weekends and they might have daytime hours available, that works out well for them. But yeah, I think it really works for any company. Some companies might look at it as doing it in teams, so it's a bit more comfortable for 2 people to go at a time. Now that might be easier for a larger company to do, to let people go out in teams of 2 to be doing the tutoring. So yeah, so it's really any size.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, why was this meaningful to you?
I am involved in Tutor30 because I cherish the time that I read to my 3-year-old at night, and it makes me sad to know that there's kids out there that don't get that experience. And so if I can be the one to provide that experience to a child once a week, I am more than happy to do that.
Why is it important? What have you learned? What's been good about it?
I think when I heard about the Schools of Hope program, what really appealed to me was that here was a formula in place. Here was a plan that had proven results. I think when I think of like literacy, helping children lead, achievement gaps, these are all ideas that are all up here in the cloud, and it's really hard to tackle these things up here when I'm only one person. So I think when I heard, and I'm also a very analytical person, so when I heard about Schools of Hope and how it all works and how it does affect change from, from a child all the way to the 2004 shrinking of the achievement gap, I thought that's a project that I really want to help, get out there. Like, people should know that, and that when they start thinking about these issues in the community that are just they're top of mind, but they're just so big, what can I do? I just want to be like on a little brochure or a video and say, it's easy, it's right here, and you don't have to search. Like, you can do it, and you can feel good about yourself, and you're helping someone. So that's why I like this project.
That's great.
All right, tell me what I'm on.
Tutor30 and you, what have you learned? What have you gotten out of it?
So I joined Tutor30, and the project was Schools of Hope, because I think that making a child feel special and that they can read and that reading is fun and learning is fun is infinitely more important than spending 30 minutes out of my workday.
All right, Tutor30 and you, what have you learned? What are you taking away from it?
Yeah, Tutor30 to me is it's less about even the tutoring as it is about consistent, stable environment with a child for 30 minutes a week. I think about the times where I'm distracted with things outside of work and how difficult that is for me to concentrate and get things done. And I think about these kids, and we talk about the socioeconomic issues and free and reduced lunch and all the things I've got working against their just ability to concentrate on learning. And if I can provide 30 minutes of stability for them to reach them on a relationship level, maybe that helps them learn a little bit, and maybe that gives them a stable relationship that they can build on into the future.
All right, so Tutor30 and you, what's been meaningful? What are you taking away from it?
I want to get involved with Tutor30 because we have an issue in Madison. We have a racial achievement gap. We have a solution, Schools of Hope, but we have a need. We have a need for tutors. I work at a huge employer in town that's filled with intelligent people that care and want to help, but they're not really sure how. So Tutor30 helps bridge that gap between Schools of Hope and a base of volunteers who can help and who can ultimately work to make a better community.
Tutor30 and you, what did you learn? What's the takeaway?
Tutor30, to me, I have 2 young children, and I can't imagine them not being able to read proficiently at a 3rd grade level, because that sets the stage for the rest of their life. And by being a part of this, I can not only help my children and help them with their future success, but to help other children with their success, because they are the next contributors and they are the next generation for our community. That's terrible.
It wasn't terrible.
Okay, Tutor30 and you, what's the takeaway? What have you learned from being part of this project?
I think I've learned from being part of this project, and I want to be a part of the Tutor30 initiative, is that early intervention is such an important role in education. And we all know that education gives you the building blocks for the rest of your life. And if you start falling behind early on in elementary school, you'll continue to fall behind, not just in your education, but in other aspects of your life. So the point of Tutor30 is to get more people involved to help with that early intervention, to get people reading proficiently by the 3rd grade so that they can continue to build on that throughout their life.
Fundamentally, education is what sets up a child's life, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a socioeconomically disadvantaged child that needs this. My son in 3rd grade couldn't read at the 3rd grade level, and despite me reading with him, it wasn't until a tutor came in and really he saw that somebody else saw that he was important, and that's really when he learned to read. And as an aside, it was an American Girl book. He loved American Girl, and once he found something that he liked, that's when he learned how to read. So thanks, American Girl.
Did Mattel pay you?
Yeah. That comes full circle.
When I was in 3rd grade, my family was in some tough financial times, and there was nights when we didn't have electricity in our house because we couldn't pay the bill. I fell behind in reading, and my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Navasker, took me under her wing and spent time with me after school so that I could get caught up and stay caught up. I went to college. I now have a great career and I work for a large company, and it's part of paying back to what was offered to me by that tutor, that mentor, that meant a lot.
All right, so go ahead and
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
why don't you do that one more time? Oh, I'm sorry. He was reaching.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He was in your
My
shot.
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
Before 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn.
All